It was supposed to be a simple Tuesday morning, but when I stepped into the break room, it felt like stepping into someone else's promotion party. There it was, a large banner hung crookedly on the wall, flanked by dollar store balloons and lukewarm coffee in plastic cups. Congratulations to the automation team, led by Denise Carter. I blinked. Read it again. Denise Carter. My last name, but not my first, and definitely not the one who had stayed up until 4 a.m. Debugging a sync crash between line 3 and the drone dock. Not the one who soldered backup circuits by hand in a storage unit behind a Jiffy Lube. Not the one who wrote the script that saved them 3 warehouse shutdowns last quarter. That was me. But you'd never know it. Dennis was a middle manager who once asked me how to copy and paste in the command line. And now he had a banner. I didn't say anything. I just stared at it long enough to feel the flush rise behind my ears. They misspelled my name. Worse, they replaced it. It was a small moment. To someone else, it might seem petty. To me, it was the first crack in the glass. Not the kind of crack that shatters. The kind that creeps quietly, silently. The kind you can't stop watching, because you know where it leads. It told me everything I needed to know. I was a ghost in my own success story. But I did what I always did. I smiled, clapped politely, even handed out cupcakes I'd baked the night before, lemon vanilla with little gear-shaped sprinkles. I stood in front of the banner with my fake smile, while the guy who couldn't reboot a server without asking me got his photo taken holding a fake trophy. I didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't quit. Because in corporate America, especially as a woman in tech, you don't get to fall apart over being invisible. You survive it. And you remember. Not out loud, but deep in your bones. That was the day I started counting. Every slight, every stolen credit, every smile that didn't reach their eyes, every room I wasn't invited to. And I didn't know it yet, but somewhere deep inside me, Ruby was already waking up. It didn't take long to figure out how this place worked. There were too many managers, too many meetings, too many people walking around with clipboards, but not a single person who could fix a real problem. The company looked like a pyramid. Not the ancient kind, the corporate kind. Top-heavy, bloated, and built on the backs of people no one saw. Every layer of middle management was another buffer, another layer of people who talked about progress but couldn't define a single line of code. And down at the very bottom, that's where I was. Not officially, of course. My title said Lead Systems Integration Specialist, but in practice, I was the one who got called at 2:13 a.m. when the whole warehouse froze and no one knew why. I was the one who stayed silent while executives gave TED Talk-level presentations about our proprietary innovation framework. I was the real backbone, and they never looked down far enough to see me. The higher-ups had their own language, buzzwords, acronyms, slogans that made them sound smart. Let's synergize on that deliverable. We need scalable modularity. Think frictionless throughput. Meanwhile, I was crawling under machinery to reset sync loops, manually wiping grease on my sleeves while praying the server didn't melt again. They built a tower of jargon. I built the system that kept the lights on. But I didn't look like them, didn't talk like them, didn't brunch where they brunched. I was too blunt, too precise, too real. And in their world, real isn't respected. It's tolerated. Until it becomes a threat. So they kept me just low enough to use, but never high enough to celebrate. They only said my name when the printer jammed. Hey Denise, the paper tray's stuck again. Denise, can you look at the scanner? It's making a weird noise. Denise, the break room microwave's blinking. Do you think it's technical? That was when I existed. Not when I streamlined the fulfillment cycle. Not when I fixed the sync overflow bug that almost crashed the West Side loading dock. Not when I stayed up until sunrise rewriting the AI logic that cut rerouting delays by 34%. No, those things happened in silence. I was a ghost with a badge, an invisible mechanic inside a machine everyone admired, but no one understood. I didn't need applause, but I did need acknowledgement, because it's one thing to be overworked, it's another to be erased. There were days I would walk into the warehouse and watch them marvel at the robots, the movement, the flow, the precision. They didn't know I'd spent 3 weekends recalibrating sensors by hand. They thought the system just worked. I'd hear them say things like, "We've come so far with automation. It's amazing what teamwork can do." Teamwork. But they never invited me to those meetings. I wasn't on the team slides. My name wasn't in the presentations. Unless the printer jammed, then suddenly I was indispensable. The irony burned. The more critical I became, the more invisible I was. And somewhere deep down, I started to wonder, was I ever really here? Before they ever called me redundant, before they erased my name from the slides and stripped me from the team, I was just a woman with burnt fingertips and a second-hand soldering iron, standing in a garage that smelled like old oil and rainwater. I didn't build Ruby in a lab. I built her on a folding table between a busted lawnmower and a stack of unpaid bills. It was never supposed to be anything big. At first, just a passion project. Something to keep my brain alive after 12-hour shifts at companies that drained the soul out of innovation. But the more I worked on her, the more she breathed. I still remember the first time I saw her light blink, soft, steady, like a heartbeat. That wasn't just a circuit booting up. It was a pulse. It was possibility. I named her Ruby, not because of the color, but because she was sharp, precise. And she bled with me through every failed version. Version 1.0 overheated. Version 1.3 fried the testbot's motor. Version 1.7 literally caught fire on my kitchen counter. But I kept going. Solder, test, rebuild, repeat. Not because I thought she would make me rich, but because I needed something that worked, something I could control in a world where everything else treated me like a glitch in the background. Ruby became my rebellion, my blueprint for sanity. She didn't complain. She didn't forget my name. She ran, and she ran well when nothing else around me did. She wasn't just a sync controller. She was the brainstem for what I imagined fulfillment could be: fast, stable, seamless. I wrapped her in an LLC, filed the paperwork myself, registered her code, her firmware, her shell, everything. Not for glory, for protection. Because I'd lost too many ideas to whiteboards I never got credit for. And this time, this one, Ruby, would be mine. I never told them what Ruby really was. When the company's modules kept overheating, I didn't say, "Hey, I built something better in my garage." I just said, "Let me test a custom patch, see if it handles heat better." They nodded. They didn't ask questions. Because the truth is, management doesn't care how the engine runs, only that the dashboard lights up green. So I installed Ruby quietly. No procurement forms, no asset tags, no serial number logged in IT inventory. She came in through my backpack. I plugged her in with my own cables, updated her firmware using my laptop, ran diagnostics in a sandboxed environment, not the company's. Every line of code ran from a repository licensed under my LLC, Carter Logic Systems, not the company, me. And I never once asked for reimbursement, because the moment I let them pay for Ruby, they could claim she was theirs. I knew how this world worked. You don't hand over your brilliance to people who believe loyalty is a one-way street. So I kept her quiet. I downplayed her. When Janet from marketing asked, "What's that blinking box again?" I smiled and said, "Just a controller patch. Keeps the bots from getting dizzy." She nodded like she understood. She didn't. No one did. And that's exactly how I wanted it. Because every time Ruby pulsed, it was a whisper. You don't own me. Every time the system was seconds away from collapse, every time a sync node blinked red, every time a drone dropped a pallet mid-scan, and chaos buzzed like a wasp in the control room, Ruby saved it. Not with flair, not with sparks, just quiet, brutal precision. A subtle reroute, a micro-adjusted delay, a line of code she wrote for herself, executing like instinct. She didn't scream for credit, she just worked. They thought the system had stabilized. They thought someone from the vendor had finally figured it out. They thought maybe they'd turned a corner. They never knew that the reason the bots didn't crash into each other was because Ruby rewrote their choreography mid-motion. They never saw that the reason the predictive engine stopped short of disaster was because she was forecasting 2 layers deeper than the human model allowed. And me, I was right there, 3 feet from the miracle, hands on the console. Eyes on the data, heart pounding through caffeine and code. And yet, when the dust settled, when the shipment went through, when the manager walked in and said, "Good job, team," my name was never said. Not once. Even when the quarterly report called it a remarkable recovery. Even when the client sent champagne. Even when the executive smiled for the press. Ruby got no thanks. I got no name. Just more fire to put out. More systems to hold together with zip ties and duct tape and pure willpower. I was the miracle behind the miracle, and nobody knew. It was supposed to be the high point. The demo had gone flawlessly, robots glided like dancers, inventory flowed like water. The client stood there stunned, murmuring something about next-level logistics. Executives were glowing. PR teams took pictures like it was the launch of a space program. And me, I stood near the back, not with the suits. Not in the photos, just watching Ruby hum beneath it all. I didn't say anything, because I thought the work had said enough. That night, I went home with a tired smile. Not pride, not quite, but a flicker of belief that maybe this time they saw me. Maybe this time they'd say my name. Maybe this time they'd finally understand what I had built for them. The next morning, I got an email. Subject, HR Transition Meeting, Friday, 9:03 a.m. Location, Small Conference Room 2. Duration, 15 minutes. No greeting, no explanation. Just logistics. I reread it 3 times. Checked the address, checked the calendar. Still there, still real. No one called, no thank you note. No next steps, just silence. I walked through the office like a ghost. No one met my eyes. Everyone looked busy, like they'd all known before I did. There was no asset checklist, no handover plan, no question about Ruby. They didn't ask for passwords, didn't even mention the system, as if none of it mattered, as if I was just some temp, a pair of hands they'd borrowed until the job was done. They erased me with the same quiet efficiency I once used to save them. And that's when I realized Ruby was still running, still alive, still sinking, still mine. And nobody had noticed. That was their biggest mistake. Michelle from HR met me with a smile like she was hosting a baby shower and not delivering a corporate execution. The room smelled like lemon disinfectant and paperwork. She had a folder. She had a script. She had no idea who I really was. Just want to thank you again for all your incredible contributions, Denise. You've truly laid the foundation for our next chapter. She said it like she meant it, but her eyes never lifted from the page. No mention of Ruby, no audit forms. No discussion of intellectual property. Nothing but standard HR boilerplate. Then came the pen. Silver, corporate, logo engraved, and completely dry. I pressed it to the paper. Nothing. Pressed harder, still nothing. It scratched but didn't write. I stared at it, and for a second, it almost made me laugh. 2 years of fixing the unfixable, of making their broken empire hum, and now I couldn't even leave cleanly. Michelle blinked. Oh. Sorry, let me grab another. But I stopped her. I kept that pen, dead ink and all, because somehow it was the most honest tool in the room. Then I signed, hard, with a different pen. Every stroke felt like cutting a cord, letting go of a lie. I smiled, said thanks for everything, and walked out. But I wasn't done. I went home, made coffee, opened my laptop, logged into Ruby's root terminal, and wrote 6 lines of code that changed everything. Heartbeat check. Every 30 days, if no renewal key received, shutdown sequence begins. Grace period, 48 hours. After that, full lockout. System frozen. Simple, elegant, silent, like a bomb ticking inside their success story. I didn't burn the building. I didn't sabotage the system. I just wrote a subroutine. 6 lines of code, tucked deep inside Ruby's core, invisible to anyone who didn't know where to look. Every 30 days, Ruby would check in with my private server, looking for one thing, a renewal key, a small string of numbers, encrypted, unique, silent. If she received it, she'd keep running. No fuss, no drama, business as usual. But if the signal didn't come once, she'd issue a soft slowdown. Non-critical functions would throttle, systems would lag, but nothing would break. Twice, she would shut down completely. Not crash, not spark, not melt, just stop, like a breath held forever. No warnings, no pop-ups. Just silence and a blinking light waiting for a heartbeat only I could deliver. It wasn't revenge, it was design, because I knew how they worked. I knew they wouldn't notice the missing heartbeat until the system began to fall apart, and by then, they'd already told the world they built it themselves. I launched the code at exactly 3 a.m. Ruby pinged my server. Heartbeat confirmed. Counter confirmed. 30 days. While they popped champagne upstairs, I watched a quiet timer begin ticking beneath everything. No one saw it, but it was there. Tick, tick, tick. They thought it was over. They thought they'd cut me loose and moved on to brighter things. Press interviews, investor calls, headline after headline praising the system they supposedly built. And I let them. For a while, I watched from the outside as they took my creation and dressed it up like it was theirs. As the CTO gave speeches with my code humming behind him, as LinkedIn exploded with fake team victories and half-true origin stories, they never mentioned Ruby. They never mentioned me. Perfect, because that's how you set the stage. Then I printed the contract. Thick ivory stock, gold corner fasteners. Not because I'm dramatic, because if you're going to deliver a bomb, you wrap it in elegance. Licensing agreement for use of CLS AlphaSync Controller v3. 2. Owned by Carter Logic Systems, LLC. Monthly licensing fee, $48,000. Terms, non-transferable, non-duplicable, remote deactivation authorized. Failure to renew results in full system lockout. No refunds, no exceptions. It was clean, it was tight, it was bulletproof. I placed it in a black envelope, just 1 page, no cover letter, no preamble, just a yellow sticky note neatly pressed into the center of the contract. 4 words, tight, tidy, and terrifying. Ruby is watching. D. Then I mailed it, directly to legal. Attention Meredith Howlern, General Counsel. I tracked the delivery. It arrived at 9:42 a.m. on a Tuesday. They didn't know it yet, but the system they were parading across the industry, the empire they'd built their reputation on, was already counting down. Tick, tock, tick. They didn't even flinch. No panic, no calls, no sudden scramble from legal. It was like they never opened the envelope at all. Because outside their bubble, the machine had already shifted gears. Press kits, promo videos, articles titled things like how company name revolutionized internal logistics using only in-house resources. LinkedIn was on fire. Photos of executives smiling in hard hats, posing with robots they didn't understand, surrounded by hashtags like innovation, teamwork, future of fulfillment. No mention of me. No mention of Ruby. Just polished headlines and manufactured applause. I watched from my couch, wearing sweatpants, a cat curled on my lap, a chipped mug of black coffee in my hand, and a live countdown ticking in the corner of my screen. 27 days left. Ruby still pulsed quiet and loyal. the conductor behind the entire operation, still syncing data, still routing pallets, still orchestrating robotic ballet with code no one else had touched. They didn't even know where the code was hosted. They just assumed it was theirs. Because no one bothered to ask. No one ever asked. And that was their favorite story. It was built in-house. Even as Ruby's every breath came from a server I paid for and a heartbeat only I could feed, they were building their brand on top of my silence. And that silence had an expiration date. I didn't need a podium. I didn't need applause. I didn't even need them to remember my name. I had Ruby, and Ruby was still running. From my kitchen table, I watched her dashboards light up in quiet pulses. Sync status green, load balance optimal, forecast engine exceeding projections, no errors, no warnings, no signs of chaos. Not yet. Just a clean, humming masterpiece being passed off as someone else's genius. I sipped my coffee, let the silence stretch. Not the silence of surrender, the silence of someone who no longer needs to explain herself. The press kept rolling, the executives kept bragging. The clients kept clapping. But I knew every function depended on a heartbeat that would vanish the moment I stopped it. I didn't need to fight, didn't need to argue, didn't need to prove anything, because power doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just waits, quietly, steadily, like a fuse burning low and slow towards something they can't see but will never forget. It started at 4:02 a.m. One heartbeat missed, then another, then all of them. Ruby stopped. Not with sparks, not with smoke, not with a bang. She just went quiet. And the warehouse followed. Conveyor belts hissed to a halt mid-spin. Drone arms froze in mid-air, clutching boxes like stunned animals mid-jump. Sorting units locked in place, red lights blinking like silent distress calls. And no one knew why. At first, they thought it was a glitch, maybe a bad sensor ping, maybe a software hiccup. A tech support ticket was filed, then a second, then 10, then all of them. By 6:17 a.m., floor-level workers were texting each other things like, "Anyone else's system totally frozen? Inventory counts are stuck at 3:12 a.m. Is that normal?" It wasn't normal. By 7:02, a Level 3 emergency report was filed. Full warehouse coordination failure. Drones unresponsive. Restart attempts failed. Supervisors tried everything. Manual resets, server reboots, failover protocols. Nothing worked. Because Ruby wasn't malfunctioning. She was obeying, doing exactly what I had written. Stop if not renewed. Freeze if ignored. Sleep until told otherwise. She didn't crash. She complied. And the silence in that warehouse, it was the sound of a lie unraveling. It started with a single question from legal. Do we actually own Ruby? The room went still. No one answered. Because no one knew. No invoice, no asset registration, no line item in procurement. No documentation of any kind that proved Ruby belonged to them. Legal dove into the archives. HR searched old onboarding files. IT tore through logs. Procurement looked for contracts. They found nothing. No trail, no license, no signature. Just a ghost in the system running the entire operation. And then the CTO exploded, slammed his laptop shut, accused legal of negligence, blamed IT for letting this happen, started shouting about sabotage and lawsuits. But it was too late. Because the truth wasn't in a server, it was in the silence. And that silence had Denise's name written all over it. They thought they could replace her. We'll rebuild Ruby, the CTO barked better, in-house with full oversight. So they tried. They brought in 3 top automation engineers, launched a full diagnostics protocol, tried to write their own sync system. On paper, it looked promising. Clean code, new logic layers, fancy buzzwords like self-healing architecture. But when they hit run, the system buckled. Warehouse lights flickered, sorting lines jammed, drones jittered, confused by timing they couldn't sync to. Because Ruby didn't just run operations, she set the pulse. She was the pulse. Every device, every process, every prediction algorithm was tuned to her rhythm. They didn't have the source code. They didn't have the keys. They didn't even have a heartbeat to follow. They hadn't built a machine. They'd built an organism. And now they were trying to clone it without the soul. By 2 p.m., the system had fully crashed. And in that silence, the cost of arrogance came due. Not in dollars, but in paralysis. The email arrived at 9 a.m. sharp. Subject line, Ruby license proposal. No greeting, no apology. Just a link. When they opened it, silence fell again. 6 pages. All terms, no fluff. Term 1, salary, triple my last one. Term 2, 6 months paid upfront. Term 3, full ownership of all code logic and intellectual property under Carter Logic Systems. Term 4, no NDA, no silence clause. I speak when I want, about what I built, where I built it, and who tried to erase me. At the bottom of the document, just one line. Sign it or collapse. Your call. They say war is loud. Sometimes it's just a Google Doc. This time, she didn't wear a badge labeled staff. She wore one that read, Consultant, Owner. The moment she stepped through the glass doors, the same hallway that once swallowed her presence now echoed with silence. People stood. Some avoided eye contact. Some whispered her name correctly this time. She walked past the CTO's office. He looked up, pale, didn't speak. She didn't stop. Straight to the server room, where Ruby's pulse had gone quiet. Denise pulled out a USB drive, matte black, engraved CLS, Carter Logic Systems. She inserted it into the main terminal, typed 8 lines of code, and then, one word, wake. The screens lit up. Every panel blinked to life. Drone arms retracted, conveyors hummed, laser sensors realigned. Ruby was back, but this time she didn't belong to the company. She answered only to the woman who once soldered her together in a garage with no windows and dreams no one believed in. Denise turned to the room. You wanted me invisible. Now I'm the only thing you can't run without. The CTO, not the old one, the new one, who replaced the last guy after the blackout, stood in the back of the room, mouth open, like he'd just watched a god reboot a dying planet. The staff, applause. Relief mixed with awe. Some even smiled, like it was a miracle. Denise didn't smile back. She didn't clap. She didn't nod. She didn't need to. She looked straight ahead at the team that once ignored her, then almost destroyed everything she built. She placed both hands on the table. Her voice was calm, even, final. Now, she said, here's how we clean up your mess. And just like that, she wasn't the underdog anymore. She was the system. They kept waiting for her to snap, to yell, to cry, to beg. But Denise never did. She didn't need revenge. She needed a contract, a lawyer, a vision, and one unshakable thing, ownership. They underestimated her silence, thought it was weakness, submission, fear. But real power, the kind that bends systems, doesn't come with shouting. It comes with strategy, with lines of code that no one understood, with a patent filed under a name they never bothered to remember, with a clause that shut down their empire in exactly 30 days. Now, as they scrabble to salvage what's left, Denise speaks for the first time, not to scream, but to teach. Silence, she says, isn't absence, it's precision. She didn't destroy them. She simply made them pay for every time they pretended she wasn't in the room. To the ones they call just the assistant, just the tech, just a pair of hands, this story is for you. You don't need to be welcomed. You don't need their permission. You don't need their spotlight. You need a door. And if none exists, build your own. Denise Carter didn't raise her voice. She raised standards. She didn't break things. She built better ones. They fired her. She licensed them. They ignored her. Now they sign checks addressed to her company. And for every overlooked genius out there quietly soldering in garages, fixing things no one understands, saving systems without thanks, remember this: you're not invisible. You're foundational. And someday, they'll pay to borrow what you always owned. She stood on the rooftop. The wind brushed her face, carrying the low hum of machines below. Thousands of drones moved in perfect rhythm, not for them, for her. Inside, technicians hustled. Managers barked into headsets. The same people who once forgot her name were now shadows in the background of a system that beat with one pulse rubies. But it wasn't Ruby that made them move. It was Denise. She tapped her tablet once. A blue light blinked across the horizon. The drones responded instantly. Precise, obedient, alive. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She just watched as the empire she once served now operated under her command. Not in revenge, not in noise, in silence, in legacy. And in that silence, you could almost hear it, the soft, steady heartbeat of a woman who finally owns everything they once stole. Through her eyes, the future wasn't coming. It had already arrived. You don't need applause to be powerful. You just need clarity of your worth, your vision, and your rights. Denise didn't scream for recognition. She built something so essential they couldn't function without her. In a world that overlooks quiet genius, own your value, protect your creations, and when they close a door on you, build a better one with your name on the lock. If this story moved you, if you've ever felt unseen, unheard, or underestimated, you're not alone. Subscribe to Through Her Eyes, where every story reminds you power doesn't always speak loudly. Sometimes it builds quietly. Tap subscribe, hit the bell, and own your story.